Although I have plenty of other ongoing projects, I figured what the heck, I've got this chassis up on my workbench. Why don't I see how quickly I can get this thing restored? So I went ahead and started putting some navel jelly on the chassis to get this rust out. It's coming along nicely. Also popped the cover off the transformer. I'm removing the rust from that and I'll repaint it. I also removed the dial so it doesn't get damaged. It's got this little metal thing on here with a couple prongs that stick out. I just took a pair of needle nose pliers so they were up against those two prongs. Gave it a little twist. It's coming right off. Alright, now I'm going to unsolder the 3 wires going to the speaker so I can get that out of the way. And then I want to remove both those controls, or at least the volume and power, and see if I can get those shafts to rotate. Switch I might leave in place because I think it's got a bit more wiring going to it. I'll see if I can get it freed up while it's in place. So, took some reference photos of these wires, so I should be able to figure out how to reconnect them. Remember, the speaker's hardwired to the chassis, so this is the only way to disconnect it. Well, short of cutting the wires, I suppose. That's one. Alright. Also give me a chance to remove the rust from this, which is pretty nasty. And also take a little Eileen's tacky fabric glue and fix that little hole up. Alright, much easier to work on this now. Also going to cut this power cord off. I'll be replacing it anyways. It's in kind of crummy shape. Alright, so. Ooh, yeah, that's right. I took the screws out of the power transformer, so it's a little loose right now. I'm going to be careful with that. I haven't had any luck freeing up this control shaft, so I think what I'm going to do for now is just replace it. I dug up a control that's the same value as that, has a power switch on it, works quite nice, and the shaft length is darn near identical from the end of the threaded portion here. Now the only problem is that it's a full round shaft, so the knob won't fit on it. Philco knobs have or control shafts have a slight flatted side. Not a half moon, it's not extreme. Just a little bit shaved off, so I imagine I can just take a file and file down a portion of it. It should work alright. I won't completely give up on this, you know, keep some penetrating oil going on there and see what I can do. I did try heating it up and that didn't help. Now, moving on to something else now, I'm curious about that old electrolytic. The radio seems to play okay, but let's see how well they actually measure up. So, I've disconnected the two 8 microfarad sections. I disconnected the leads from the circuit, and I've hooked up my vintage solar capacitor analyzer. I got my leads going to ground in one of the 8 microfarad sections. Got it set for electrolytic. So first off, let's check the capacitance and let's check the leakage. I do get an eye open at looks So 15 microfarads. But this thing isn't super accurate when it comes to testing electrolytics. But seems to be okay in that regard. But let's check leakage. This is rated for 475, so I should be able to pretty much go up all the ranges without any leakage. Alright. Well, we've got leakage already at position number 2. This light should go out as the capacitor charges. If it stays on, that means there's leakage. Alright, went out. So the capacitor seems to be reforming. 1, 2. So you can use this device not only to check capacitors, but you can also use it for reforming. You just start working your way up the ranges and leave it on and switch position until this light goes out. And hopefully, ideally, it does go out at some point. But we've been on 3 for a while now, so no, it's entirely possible I'll be able to reform this and get that light to go out. But clearly, there's some leakage now, even at just the number 3 position. I don't think that quite equates to 300 volts. Because I think when you go up all the way, it's only 4 something. So, but it's in the ballpark of 300 volts, let's say. So I'll let this sit for a while and see if that ever goes out. I've had this sitting for about 15 minutes and it's just not improving. I've got leakage at the 3, 4, and 5 positions. So let's check another section on it. Oh, one thing I should note is that another little touch you can do with this is when you turn this down on a capacitor that's holding a charge, when you get to 0, it discharges a cap and you see the other side of the neon light up. So that's a good sign. That means that it actually charged up and then discharged. Although obviously we still have some leakage current. Now try the other 8 microfarad section. Check the capacitance first. Well, that's not a good sign. No eye deflection whatsoever. Except all the way over here, which means it's open. So it looks like this one's dead. If I check for leakage, just for the heck of it. That's pretty erratic. So yeah, this section on the cap is dead. It probably dried out electrolytic. It's just shot. So although the radio seemed to be playing okay, it should play even better when I replace these caps. I've removed the electrolytic can so I can restuff it. I'm just going to cut the can open somewheres right around here, and between this cardboard cover and the clamp that holds it to the chassis. That'll hold the seam back together. And I also popped the cover off the transformer, removed the rust, and I've repainted it with some semi-gloss black enamel paint. And I've been using some naval jelly to remove the corrosion from the chassis. And down below, I've started to clean things up a bit. I removed the insides of this cap and installed 2 new safety caps. This is the one that goes right across the AC line. Well, actually not across the AC line. From either side of the AC line to ground. That should be a Y-type safety cap. And to aid in cleaning up the chassis around the transformer, I'm just going to go ahead and unmount it while taking that capacitor out and this block. A bunch of wires are already disconnected from the transformer anyways. So I've taken some reference photos. I've got I think 4 going to the rectifier socket and then 2 going over here. It's for the filament supply. Also notice that there has been at least some work done to this because I noticed the speaker connections are connected on there very, very poorly. So I suspect somebody worked on this and didn't decide to take the route that I took, which was to disconnect this end from the speaker. They disconnected it in this end instead and didn't do a very good job of reconnecting the wires. So I'm just going to go ahead and get these out of the way while I work on the rest of this set. There we go. Finally. A lot of tar in there. Well, I'm just going to start heating this thing up. Maybe I can jam a corkscrew in there and pop the guts out. I managed to clean out the end fairly well. I think I can reuse these wires even. Now I've been heating up this can and I plunged a corkscrew into it. If I'm lucky, pull this sucker out. Alright. It's a little bit different than what I've seen before in that there's like a cardboard insulating layer between the metal can and this. And there are 4 wires coming out, and one of them is the common negative. So I guess they really did isolate the metal can from ground, which seems a little overkill because they put a cardboard cover on the outside insulated, so maybe they're just being really extra careful that the negative would never make contact with the chassis. But what that means for me is that it's pretty hard to clean these out completely. It's like in the lid here too. I was able to get most of the tar out, but then there's cardboard that's like glued to the aluminum. So I think I'll just do as best I can and just leave whatever is remaining behind. I mean, it's not going to hurt the new caps any, I wouldn't think. I decided I did want to really clean this cap out. So I poured some naphtha in there, paint thinner basically, and let it soak for a while. Then worked a screwdriver down between the cardboard and the metal can. And eventually, it all came out. So a little more rinsing out of this, and then I will start restuffing it. Here are my new electrolytics. I decided to go with some reproduction wire rather than try to reuse the old stuff because it was kind of chewed up. So I connected all the negatives together and put one wire on each of the positives, put a little heat shrink around it to insulate it. And now the last thing I'm going to do is take a big old piece of heat shrink, tubing like 1 inch in diameter, put it around the whole package there, and shrink that up. Alright, nice, solid, and secure. So, run these wires through the base and put the caps up inside, run it through the base, and put the cardboard sleeve back over, and this clamp should hold the whole thing together. If not, I can always wrap a little tape around here, like some aluminum tape with adhesive backing, something like that. I've made some pretty good progress on the chassis. I've been restuffing the caps and the bakelite blocks, so it may be hard to tell what I've done and what I haven't, but so far I've restuffed that, and that guy. Just about to restuff this. Now in the past I've disconnected everything and removed the bakelite block completely to work on it, but I was reading about somebody online who had a little bit different technique of trying to do them in place, so that's what I've been experimenting with. So I removed the screw that was holding it down, and I disconnected a couple leads that were kind of short, and I'm leaving the rest of the wires intact, which gives me enough slack that I can flip it around and then work on it without having to disconnect everything. So once I get to this point, use a heat gun on low, soften it up a bit, chip away at it with a small screwdriver, and work out the insides. Also, I make sure to clip the little leads coming through from the cap inside. It's just a single cap in each one of these blocks, and there's a little wire that comes out here and here. I removed some of the solder with solder work, and used a utility knife to cut through the little wire. So now when I heat it up from the other side, this will come out slowly. I say slowly because I'm just using minimal heat and chipping at it to kind of minimize the mess and the smell. And I'm about to restuff this guy. I'll fire up my camera on the tripod and show you how I've been doing this. I also have found some evidence of repairs. For example, this guy looks to me like a repair. This chain through here of this resistor, this one, and I think this guy's colorful one down in here. Those are the three bias resistors. Those guys, the 27, the 20, and the 200 ohm. And one of them, this guy, has been replaced with a couple resistors, mica molds, in parallel. It measures okay, and I'm kind of inclined to leave it in, just because it's a nice vintagey repair look, even though it doesn't match the other resistors. Because if I put a modern resistor, it's really going to be jarring, and this tests okay, so I figure, why not? And actually, in general, all the other resistors are within spec, so I think I'm going to end up leaving all these original resistors in place. So we got one bakelite block left to do. Restuff this guy. And one more up there. I think that takes care of all the work down here, hopefully. And I've got my restuff cap good to go. With this cardboard in place and this clamp, this thing's not going anywhere. So I don't see any reason to use any kind of adhesive or tape or anything to hold these two halves together. As far as the control shaft goes, there's quite a bit of corrosion on this, and that's definitely why it's seized up. I've been using some heat in WD-40. It really hasn't had any effect whatsoever, so I'm going to run out later tonight and look for maybe some liquid wrench or some other type of penetrating oil and see if that'll do me any good. I've shown this technique before in other videos, so I'm not going to go into too much depth, but basically, heat gun, heat up the cap on both ends, once it's soft, then grab the body with a rag or thick paper towel and try to pull it out. The end caps are made out of a more heat resistant, tougher material. I'm not even sure if it is wax versus the wax of the rest of the body, which melts at a lower temp. Trick is to kind of keep both ends heated up at the same time. Not quite. Bigger guys take a little bit more heat. Don't want to get it too hot though, you start to char and discolor the cardboard tube. That's why I switched to low heat once the heat gun got up to operating temperature on high. This one's being stubborn. sometimes when they get stubborn, I just rip one end out. And with that out, then I can just focus on pulling the rust out from the other end. Alright, there we go, that's it. It's not really all that hot, so I can pick it up now. And I'll just chip away, pick away at whatever's left there, and then I will show you how I put the new cap inside. Okay, the original was 0.25 microfarad, rated for 400 volts. I dug up a 0.22 microfarad rated for 630. That should be plenty close enough. The idea is I want to put this inside and then reseal the ends, but this is too small, so first thing I want to do is wrap some tape around this to build up the diameter, and then I'm going to seal the ends with some brown hot glue. Just using some cheapo masking tape. It's critical. That'll do. I'm not sure if this is hot enough. Let's see. Nope, not quite. Okay, I think it's hot enough now. I'm just going to go around with the hot tip of the gun to smooth it out. Flip around to the other end. Also put a bit of torn up paper towel as kind of wadding just to fill in some of the space. I don't have to use quite so much hot glue. A little bit more. Okay, well, that'll do. Not entirely authentic. I know some guys go so far as to reuse the original wax on the end plugs, and then maybe they'll dip this whole thing in wax, beeswax, to make the outside look a little bit grungier. But I kind of like them looking a little bit clean like this. It's easier to read the print. I suppose I'll demonstrate the bakelite block too. This gets kind of messy, so I put down some paper towel. I put a new layer of masonite over my workbench recently and trying not to get it all cruddy right away. Sticking a screwdriver in that little bakelite block there so I can manipulate it. Get my hand out of the way from the heat. Got the heat gun on low. I don't want to melt this out, although you can. And then I know some guys heat these up and they poke from the other side. I don't know, toothpicks or something like that, and kind of push the whole thing out. But I've gotten in the habit of doing it all from the back side and just kind of scraping it out. In a 2 or 3 or 4 passes. See, it's soft, but it's not super hot. I can hold this block. I'm not burning my fingers. There aren't any fumes from the stuff. Just Comes right out. Don't want to pry too hard though, or you can crack the block. Like I'm already down to where it's getting too hard, so heat this up again. Also heard you can freeze these and then kind of chip them, and I guess when you get this cold enough it gets really brittle, but I've never tried that. Of course that would, if I'm not going to remove all the wires, that would involve putting the entire radio inside the freezer. Main reason I want to minimize the fumes is it's the middle of winter and I don't have any windows open or anything, so not much ventilation. If you're wondering why are they using these bakelite blocks at all when they've got a bunch of caps like this, I think it's just so they have some tie points. Because the insides of these are basically just paper caps, no different than the ones in the cardboard tubes. You know, they don't need to have tie points for the other components. Almost ready to come out. There we go. Alright, so let's scrape away the remaining bits of crap inside, and then get ready to mount the new cap. They don't indicate the values on these. These use the part number. Like this is the 3793 SU. So look at the schematic. And where do we have a 3793 SU? There it is, 3793 SU. It's 0.015 microfarad bakelite. For the new cap, I like to use these little chiclet caps. I bent the leads over so the spacing matches up with the holes in the block. Just feed them through from the bottom. And then wrap them around little lugs on the top side. Trim them off to length and solder them on. And remount the cap and hook the couple connections I removed back in. I have some good news on the control front, I think. Although I did find a control that I think would be a suitable replacement, I didn't give up on this control. So I saw some of the comments you guys left, and I did some reading online, and I tried a number of techniques. I tried heating it up, and that didn't do the trick. I tried WD-40, numerous applications, let it seep in overnight. That didn't do it. I went to the hardware store tonight and picked up some penetrating oil and let that soak in for a while. And I also broke off the metal tension collar thing that was in here, kind of like a snap ring, because that was pretty chewed up. I also noticed when I examined this that looks like somebody had pried up these tabs in the past, so perhaps somebody was tinkering with this before, I'm not sure. But at any rate, after I broke out that metal collar, I did some more with the penetrating catalyst, heated it up on the stove again, got a pair of pliers on there and gave it a good yank, and it finally broke free. And I got some oil down in there and kept working it and working it and working it. It was really stiff, but after about 100 rotations back and forth, finally got to the point now where I can just do it by hand. However, without that tensioning ring in there, it feels pretty crappy unless I yank up on this to simulate having that collar in there. Also, I have not tested this yet, so I don't know for sure that the switch is good and that the wiper is making good contact, but it seems promising. Now for the switch, that was much rustier, and the penetrating, well, it wasn't doing a whole lot. So I actually did a couple applications of this Rust-Oleum liquid rust stripper, and that got a lot of the corrosion off. And I was just yanking on that a bit more with pliers, and it seems like it's finally starting to rotate as well. Try to show you that here. I'm just breaking out some paper towels so I don't gouge up the shaft with my pliers. Let's see if I can get this to. Yeah, see, it's stiff, but it is starting to rotate. So I'll just use a little more rust stripper on there. Use some more penetrating oil, and hopefully that will free up as well as this pot does. So now I'm going to have to do a little research online and see about replacing that with something. Because without it, it just doesn't, like I said, I'm sure that's put, when it's in there, it pulls up on this and it puts tension on the wiper down inside here. So you really need to have that in there. Alright, I think I'm in the home stretch now. I did test out this control, and it does seem to work just fine. You see switches operating, and there's a smooth resistance change throughout the range. Now I'm just looking for any suggestions on how to replace that ring there. I looked around online, didn't really find anything. I got some thoughts, maybe like take a washer, like a split washer, and try to squeeze it in there somehow, something like that. But at any rate, I'm moving on. So I finished recapping underneath. All those caps have been restuffed down in there. And now I'm proceeding with more cosmetic stuff. So I have carefully unmounted the aluminum cans that go over the IF coil so I can clean them up. I want to get the corrosion off of the screws around the bottom and then polish up the aluminum. And it also gives me a chance to clean up the tops where the trimmer caps are. See, I brushed the dust off of this one. This one's still filthy, and that greenish stuff is cadmium corrosion. I've gotten most of the corrosion off the chassis. There's still some down in here I want to work on this tube shield, the chassis down here. And then I think I'll unmount this capacitor. Remarkably though, I don't need to replace the shock mounts. There's 4 of them, 2 on either side, and they are in really good shape. I still have a lot of spring to that old rubber, but I want to get it off so I can get the corrosion out from underneath it, and maybe clean up the cap itself a little bit. I've already washed out the bearings with some WD-40 and then put some white lithium grease in there. Same on the bearing point on the other end, so it's turning very well now. So once I get this last bit of corrosion out and clean up these shields, I think I'll start putting this back together. Oh, and I have finished with the transformer. Here is the repainted power transformer. Came out quite nice, I think. This is the very last thing I'll do, reinstall this, along with the rebuilt electrolytic filter cap. I'm taking a break from working on the chassis to take a look at the cabinet. I just took out the grill cloth, and it's pretty darn nasty. Got some water stains on it, so let's ponder what I want to do about that. And it's in pretty rough shape, that's for sure. First thing I want to see about doing is popping this out somehow this plywood got caved in here, and some little bits that are preventing it from popping back out, so maybe get a little utility knife in there and just trim that away and get this flush, clamp it up, glue it, and I'll hunt around for a little strip of wood to put down here. Don't need to worry about anything too elaborate on that, just so it doesn't look so bad. Then I want to start gluing separation. Ooh. Gluing up the separation all around the front lip here. Stabilize any loose glue blocks inside. Take a closer look at this dial. So the glass is missing. I can either maybe find somebody local to cut me a piece of glass, or I think dialcovers.com sells something suitable. Also want to deal with this rust. So it looks like there's 4 little Phillips screws that hold that on. I'll get that off. Start using some rust remover on it. I think there are a few tabs, maybe one on each side, that hold this part into the outer frame. I want to carefully get this out, and then I could use more aggressive rust remover on the outer edge and paint that up. Maybe paint this up too, just the outer edge, like a nice dark brown. And I want to stabilize the edge of the faux finish. Along the bottom it's separating a little bit. It's because the feet are gone from this, so it's just been rusting. You know, right on the bottom. Let's just get this bottom edge chewed up. And then I want to carefully work on cleaning up the photo finish, and then put on some clear coats of lacquer. Don't want to do anything too fancy. Once you mess this up, there's no going back. But I really just want to clean up the worst of the dirt around here. And then I'll just clear coat the whole thing. I think I might even just leave the original decal in there. I'm not sure if that's a part of the photo finish or on top. Sure, it feels like it's flush, so it might be part of the original printing. If I find another decal that was exactly the same size, I could put it right on top of that. Seems like a pretty iffy proposition, so I think I'll just leave it alone. Maybe a little touch up around the edges here, and that's that. Don't want to fuss with this too much. Once that's all stabilized, then I'll do something about this, which I think will go pretty fast. Strip off the remaining finish, seal it, grain filler, toner lacquer, finish lacquer. Pretty straightforward stuff.